Another chapter is here. Welcome to Don't Burn the Sacred Text. I am one of your hosts, Brandon, and I am not here with my co host, Lindsay, today. No, as you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube or you're seeing this on Instagram, TikTok, or wherever, if you are, go over and follow us on YouTube. I have a special guest straight from the caves of not Dathomir, but Patreon. It's Amanda.
The caves of early childhood education is probably more
Oh,
appropriate. So,
yeah. Yeah,
it's
it has been quite a year this year.
mhm.
This is the return of Don't Burn the Sacred Text. It's been a minute because for those of you who are listening, Lindsay has been working like 80 hours a week. I have been somehow escaping at my 40 to 45 hours a week. And Amanda has been drowning as well. So
um,
it's
yes.
been a lot. It's been a big year. So we're doing it. We're doing the best we can, and we're back on Don't Burn the Sacred Text, and we're going to be talking about Wayseeker today. Justina Ireland's last installment in Star Wars ever for right now. I
I
guess we'll
was
see.
surprised I hadn't stayed up with the news quite as much, and I was surprised when I saw that.
Yeah,
But
so we'll have to see how everything goes. If she comes back in the future, she's gone for at least for now to go explore other avenues, which is totally fine. You know, she has earned her keep and has earned, in my opinion, the right to come back whenever she wants to. And we'll see if she does. But for today, we're going to talk about Wayseeker. But Amanda, we haven't had you on here. Was it Ronin? Was the last one we had you on?
oh, Burn the Sacred Text?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm
for
pretty
the sacred
sure.
text.
Yeah, I
Okay.
might have only done that one. I'm not entirely
Yeah,
sure.
I feel like there's one more we're forgetting, but either way, it's been a hot minute since we have had you on. And something I like to talk to Lindsay about sometimes is just other than Star Wars, what the heck have you been reading lately?
So much.
I know that's why I wanted to ask you the question. I know the answer, but people at home want to know.
Well, I am now the biggest Brandon Sanderson fangirl you'll ever meet. And they have Dragonsteel Nexus going on right now in Salt Lake City, which is their big con for his own con for his own stuff. And I'm just sad I'm in Houston and not there. But they just this guy he writes so he's writing a third trilogy installment of an era. He's writing the next 5 books of another planets. So he writes a universe. So he's got a third trilogy going for one planet. He's got another 5 books for another planet. All of it is set out, lined out for the next, I don't know, decade or something. And then when he gets bored of those, he just writes another book in a whole nother place, just to break it up. So he just announced another book. You're still muted.
They're like 1,000 pages each, so it's not like this is light reading. You know, like all respect to Dan Brown, but this is not Dan Brown. The books are yay thick. They get confused for dictionaries sometimes. I've heard. So yeah, not light
Yeah.
reading, but and
Oh,
you're an actual physical like book reader, or at least Kindle,
I
right?
do all of it.
Okay.
I'm also really into Dungeon Crawler Carl right now, and that is audio. I do that with audio because the reader is one of the most talented readers I've ever heard. Voice actor, could be a voice actor. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if he does that, but so I do audio for those. I do Kindle. I go to the library when I can. I prefer physical books, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
I don't discriminate.
I hear that. I do. I got to
I
be
know
honest.
it
I
doesn't work for
discriminate.
everybody.
Um like look, I think there's no wrong way to consume a story. So don't, at me on well, I'm not on X anymore. The account still exists, but, TikTok or Instagram or anything. Um but I am a hard stance that listening to a book is valid but is not reading.
I see where you're coming from. It just inherently bothers me to hear that
I
because
know.
I feel like it demeans the medium. Because people get
No,
kind of I
no.
know you're not because we're friends and I know you.
Yeah.
It's just it's a thing you hear, and when people say it,
Yeah.
they're like kind of got their nose up in the air. But it's not reading. Like
No, it's
okay,
because
it's like
reading is a verb, right? It has to be defined somehow, and I just don't think like it contains it uses your eyes. Sorry,
you
I'm a hard
still
stance
well.
on that.
If you visualize, which I don't, I have aphantasia, but Listening requires visualization as well. So you're working
Yes,
some
but
of those brain centers.
that's fair. That's fair. I'm a hard stance on. I mean I got a stack of books over here. I'm still a hard copy person preferably. But honestly, like I think a lot of that is just I spend most of my day looking at screens, you know? And so, you know, I read to go to bed and I don't want to read looking at a
Right.
screen. I wish I
Right.
could do that and like fall asleep well and everything, because half the time I fall asleep in my books on the other side of the bed with no bookmark in it, and I like gotta spend the first 5 minutes of my
Mm,
reading time figuring out where I was at.
yeah.
But yeah, I still like a hard copy. I still like post-its in there marking the book. And man, when it comes to Wayseeker, I had a lot of notes. So let's go ahead and jump into this book. And you of course know this, but for those of you listening at home, we like to rate the books before we have our conversations about them, and then at the end we will re-rate the books and see if we had any push pull in either direction for each of us. So since you were kind enough to join us and come out of your Patreon cave, as I'm calling it, let me know, what do you think? What did you rate this particular book on a scale of 1 to 5?
I was thinking about this about 15 minutes ago walking the dog. And I
We're
put it
so
at a
prepared on here.
actually I had thought about it before and then I kind of was wanted to mull it over a little more and was like, oh yeah, I never finished that. I'd probably give it a 3.
Okay.
I think I said about a 3.
Solid. I'll be honest, I finished this book in August. Lindsay, like I said, has been working a lot and has not had time to record, which is why we're having guests on. And so I took my notes on this book now almost 4 months ago, and so I was rereading them to try to remember, you know, what the book was about and everything. I originally had this at a 4 out of 5. I'm gonna start us off at a 3.75 out of 5. And for me, the big reason is I realized I didn't really care about the plot of this book. The plot was not interesting at all. Um, and I think when you think about like character driven books, you know, like E.K. Johnston writes, this wasn't as strong as like the Queen's trilogy or Ahsoka or things of that nature, which, you know, is a problem. But it did have some extreme highlights that just screamed like Brandon's version of Star Wars. And we'll get into a couple of those quotes and stuff today. But it was an enjoyable, quick read, and I'm not saying the plot was bad. It just didn't do anything special, and we'll get to this, you know, as we move towards the end of the book. But the ending of the book threw me for quite the loop. So we'll get to that. So, what were your general impressions on the book and your take? Because you just finished this, what, last week?
So I was debating between a 2.5 and a 3, and the whole reason was when I finished it, like you, I really had enjoyed it. I was pretty high on it. I had We won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but I had just finished Sanctuary like the day before,
Mm,
and I definitely so that book was very much in my mind, and I'll just say I enjoyed Sanctuary much more.
yeah, same.
Um, and so I was like, I liked it. I'm usually pretty high on things, and then the more it sat with me, the more today I realized I don't really remember almost anything that happened in this book. I was
Mm,
trying to find a good synopsis for it, and
yeah,
I just kept running into reviews, which I didn't want to touch before recording. So because that memory of liking it is there and enjoying it, I bumped it from a 2.5 to a 3.
okay,
But it really was kind of a fairly average. That was a good read. I don't regret it. It was worth the
yeah.
time. Will it stay with me? No.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not one that I necessarily think I'm going to go like reread, unless I am looking for like these specific quotes that you know, I think is going to kind of, at least on my side of things, frame our conversation today, is some of these things about especially how Vernestra frames being a Jedi at this point, because this book, it takes place in the High Republic, but it is not a High Republic book. I think. Oh, I wish I still had it. I had it at my
It's
desk for the longest time. It's called a High Republic novel, but it's not our High Republic proper that we, you know, went through
mhm.
with Vernestra being a part of that. And so it still has those elements, but it does feel It does feel like a sequel that you put out like 20 years after, of a movie that people just kind of a little bit liked. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's not a
Hmm.
lot of excitement about it. And obviously people loved the High Republic. So I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying like that level of excitement where it's like, oh, they're releasing a sequel to that movie? Okay, I guess if I'm free that weekend, maybe I'll go.
Right.
But as far as like feeling like it was a High Republic book, I really struggled with
Well,
this one.
the really interesting thing, and this is one thing I wanted to get into, the marketing of the book
Mm.
and kind of Disney's Star Wars marketing in general, I think has a real problem right now.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother
Yeah, I
conversation.
won't go way, way into, well, I could. If you ever listen to Patreon, tangents are Sarah and
Mm.
I's, we both have ADD. It is our thing. But,
Patreon.com/clashing sabers for those of you who are interested.
and there will be content up this weekend. I am
Let's
emerging out of my
go.
mental health hole. So, um, but it's an Acolyte tie-in novel.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. It is.
It's
Yes.
not
There's
High
like,
Republic. It's Acolyte.
well, it does say a High
Well,
Republic novel on the
yes,
front.
it does. But when you look it up, the title of it is like The
The
Acolyte
Acolyte Wayseeker.
colon
Yeah.
Wayseeker. And that, once again, Disney expectations. Name things properly, market them properly,
Hmm.
including The Acolyte. My expectation is The Acolyte. What we got was High Republic. And even
That's a
then, it
really good
wasn't
point.
fully either one, but it was
Yeah.
more. I mean, there were all the name drops and everything from the High Republic. And there was Indara was there. That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very different from like the things that we got in let's say like around Rogue One, right? We got the Rebel Rising and we got Catalyst, right? And those were they were marketed as like tie-in novels, right? um I feel like this wasn't really marketed as a tie-in novel. It was like this happens around the time of these
That's
things.
fair,
And well, it may be fair, but I don't think it's the right way to do it. You know what I
especially when
mean?
you put Acolyte in the title. That's
Yeah.
what really gets me.
And I wonder too, and this is where, I get my tinfoil hat and put it on. I wonder what Justina Ireland thought about what they did with Vernestra in The Acolyte, because that's kind of her character. That's her,
Mm-hmm.
Dave Filoni to Ahsoka kind of
Mm-hmm.
situation. And speaking as a huge fan of Vernestra, that's obviously what
Mm.
ruined the show for me more than anything
Uh-huh.
else. That's what leads to me refusing to rewatch it and stuff like that. Like the Rise of Skywalker has, writing issues, and I still go back and watch it, stuff like that. So I'll go back and I'll watch stuff that I didn't love, but it was so egregious that it's led to me refusing to rewatch it, right? All of that to say, if I felt that way about Vernestra and I've only spent the time reading the books versus Justina Ireland, who spent time creating her, thinking about her psyche, all, everything you have to do when you delve into writing a fictional story, I have to imagine that it upset her quite a bit that they went so far left field with the character in there. And so I wonder if in writing this book, and this is where the conspiracy theory comes in, did she write it in a way where she was like, I am going to do everything I can to redeem this character from the, I'll just say it, bastardization of the Acolyte, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then when it comes out and it's tied into the Acolyte, it's like it doesn't really feel like that because the author intended it not to feel like that, right? And then that it gets even deeper into the conspiracy theory, and I have no sources. This is pure conspiracy. But did her feelings around the Acolyte and her refusal to write Vernestra like the Acolyte version and she wrote it more like the High Republic version, did that lead to her deciding to step away from Star Wars? There's so many things around this book that, while it's a solid story and there are great character moments and amazing quotes, it could have been kind of the nail in the coffin of Justina Ireland wanting to be a part of Star Wars anymore.
So when I finished reading it, I didn't know that we'd be recording about it, and that's totally fine. So I did go on to, I'm kind of a Reddit addict at this point. I
Mm,
love forums. I know that they can be nasty and dangerous, but I tend to find the better stuff. And there are just some comments there that made me think exactly the same thing. That her hands were tied, well, to an extent, while writing this book because of the acolyte. And and I don't even know how substantiated these claims were. I can't remember. I didn't write down the source or anything. But there was just a lot of like kind of whisperings, mumblings that sounded like that she was not very happy in writing this book, or at least as much as she would have been in the past. Or I
yeah.
don't want to say not happy, but maybe just a little frustrated. Maybe that's a better word.
Yeah, yeah, and I kind of wish I had saved her post, um, but it very much felt like it. Okay, so I'm gonna go sports analogy here. Okay, so buckle up. It very much felt like a player who's played for a certain team for 20 years who gets traded, writing their like thank you note to the team on X or Blue Sky or whatever, where it's like, thank you for all of these years you've given me. I really enjoyed my time. It's time to move on for both sides to better horizons, right? Just that very rote, like, this is what you say
Right.
to not ruffle any feathers, but also not say like, this is my decision and I wanted this, or it was mutually agreed upon. It's very much like what's going on behind the scenes. And I think we've been hurt by Disney Star Wars over the past 10 years, in terms of how it has interacted with its creators, uh, specifically thinking about like hiring directors and then firing directors left, right, and center. That I think like we also are a little wounded by that, where we kind of look for maybe what's wrong with any situation, because it becomes a defense mechanism at some point.
Hmm. Well, and to be fair, she could just have been, that was a massive, massive project that she was a part of. And it could have been, okay, maybe this didn't go exactly the way I wanted it, but this was also something I was planning on doing anyway. I'm ready to move on to something new. So I don't want to give her motivations and feelings that she,
No, no.
as a professional, may not even have. But there seems to be some subtext there a little bit, but I'd be looking too much into it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have no sources on this. It could be going in any direction.
And I don't want
Reddit.
to say that she wasn't professional.
No, no, not at all.
So,
Not at all. Like I think, and I don't think necessarily even that there's like ill will or anything. I just think
right.
maybe, if I know if I were in that situation, uh, I would have been less than pleased with the way things went down.
Hmm.
Because as we've talked about, and you and I have talked about both on mic and off mic, it didn't need to be Vernestra. It could have been any High Republic Jedi. It could have
Hmm.
been, really any Jedi. You could have made a new one. But the fact that they did use Vernestra, to try to get eyeballs on it, and then they did what they did with the character, which was so untrue to her nature, that is where everybody gets burned. Now, that said, when we talk about this book,
Yes,
the Vernestra of it all rocks. She's so good in this book. I literally, like, I'm reading it and I'm gonna tell you. Let me pull it up. So I'm gonna pull up my notes here.
please
Um,
do. They'll help me
and
too.
and this is the quote where I went, yeah, Vernestra's back. And it's a long one, so forgive me. But it's on page 44. And it's Vernestra thinking to herself, and it says, when it came to failure or loss, I always acknowledged the emotion, let it wash over me, and grieved as I needed to. And then I put it aside, not letting it drive my actions. Some younger Jedi had taken that lesson to mean emotions and the connections they engendered were bad, and my heart hurt that they thought cutting themselves off from connection was the way to be successful as a Jedi. Our connection with others gave us purpose as a Jedi, but we could not let their fear become ours, and we could not let our personal worries drive our actions. That, to me, has always been the true meaning of balance we Jedi strove toward. Living without fear, loving and embracing the grief that ultimately came when such a strong connection was lost. The sweet and the bitter forever entangled. It was a simple lesson that was impossible to learn, and I had been trying for decades. Wow. Like, if that is not, They could have just like put a little like footnote and go written like, Brandon, this one's for you, because it's literally everything that I've been saying about a Jedi. And I know I'm not the only one, but it's everything that I've been saying about like what a Jedi should be and what makes the High Republic Jedi, you know, the the pinnacle of what the Jedi Order should be, and what makes Luke a successful Jedi and everything like that, is that attachment is not a bad thing. It's how you react to the attachments that becomes the bad thing. And there's something. Let me find the other quote real quick while we're talking about this, and then I'll leave it to you. But there's something she says about um, Emery. Um, One of my this is on page 230, so it's quite a ways later. One of my former Padawans was Imri Cantos, and he told me once that every effort, every life matters, as each one contributes to the overall brightness of the Force. He maintained that it was normal and right to grieve the loss of each life, no matter how great or awful, because death reminded us that there could be darkness, that the loss of any light was worth notice. Like, I think those two go so well together, because it's like, yeah, you can have these emotions. These feelings are natural. It's how you handle them that really makes the difference and defines who you are as a person and as a Jedi, because the Jedi purport to not be holier than thou, but to be these higher level beings, right? Who are supposed to be model citizens. And so you have to be able to feel these feelings, let them go, move on, and like Vernestra says, not act out of
That's why Kanan is in my Jedi trifecta. It's the
them.
exact same story. He was somebody who used his relationships to propel him to sacrifice for the greater good instead of his. Oh, sorry, my window's open and there's a plane flying by.
That's fun stuff.
Okay. It was a little stuffy in this room. Rabbit, there's a squirrel. There we go. Rabbit trail, squirrel. But yeah, my so okay, start my Star Wars story starts with the Mandalorian, backtracking, watching things in chronological order. And so up to that point, my view of the Jedi was very detached, kind of robotic is the way you're supposed
Mm.
to be. And I always did kind of puzzle over, okay, how do you not grieve when somebody dies?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're in a situation where you're out there defending, and as a peacekeeper, you're going to see people die. You may even be the cause of that. So, how do you lock that away? And that can't be good for you. So then Kanan comes around, like, that's what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't even a Jedi at the time, you know, it just,
Yeah,
well,
not a Jedi Order proper kind of
yeah,
character.
classically
Yeah.
trained. So the same thing with Vernestra. Like, what I did think this book did do really well is bridging that gap between the Jedi of the High Republic and the Jedi of the prequels, and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
starting to see where that's headed in a way that doesn't vilify the Jedi. There is going to be someday, Sarah and I talk about it all the time, a podcast recording on Patreon about the vilification of the Jedi and how we feel about it. And
Yeah, no joke. Because
our
it's
feelings
rampant.
run
It's
deep.
rampant in fandom.
Oh my goodness. And in the material that's being produced, I can't look at Yoda the same way, even though I have a Christmas Yoda animatronic on my front porch right now.
Don't
So
even get me started on that,
I know,
please.
I
Oh my
know.
god.
So it's very refreshing. And as somebody who struggles, sometimes I feel like I have a robot side of me and a very, very highly emotional side of me. And getting those
And
two to
balancing the two.
mesh,
Yeah.
like I see some of me in Vernestra as well.
Well, and I think book does a good job, like you said, of showing and bridging the gap between those two kind of eras. Um, but I think or I shouldn't say but and I think that it is done through showing the impact that the battle with the Nile had, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, where people are more, I guess, affected by things, right? So we think of Indira and her trauma and the way that she was allowed to kind of um, isolate, in the Jedi library more. I don't think that would have happened in the High Republic era. Not that they would have like not embraced her emotionally, but they kind of abandoned her to her own trauma, where in the High Republic, I think there would have been more of a counseling, for lack of a better way to put it, and
You see
that I
that when
think is
you, oh, sorry.
no,
Sorry.
go for it, take it away.
You see a counterpoint to that with Wreath.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's my favorite from the High Republic because I really identified with him, especially at the beginning. Like, just stick me with my books. I don't want to be out there with the scary stuff.
Leave me
Just let me
alone
be
with
with
my
my
books.
books.
Exactly.
So there is like, but he was pulled out, and so was Endara eventually, but Wreath was much sooner.
Yeah, and it felt like Indara was pulled out because they wanted her to do tasks, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt like Wreath was pulled out because they wanted him to grow. And that's a very different like means to an end. And, there's no right way to handle trauma, obviously, right? Everybody has their own way, and that's what makes it so complicated. There's as much as we know, there's so much we don't know, and there's no right way to approach it because it's such a complex situation, whatever it may be. But the way that they were just like, well, now you have to go do this. You're done. You don't get an option. And she's like, I'm not ready, and that advocacy for herself was kind of disrespected. I thought was obviously like a challenging thing to read, but I thought it was done really well in the book to show, the deterioration of the Jedi. I also just really loved this might be my favorite moment from the book, and the scene that like I think about the most is when Vernestra was just like, F protocol, everybody to the training room right now. I got something to say. Um, like she calls the council to order and
Yes,
all
yes,
of
yes,
this
yes.
stuff. And Yoda and Yaddle are just like, do you do that? Do you do that? Who does this? Who handles this? It was so good. It was everything I kind of would have wanted. And going back to our earlier conversation about like Justina Ireland, kind of using this book as kind of a middle finger to the acolyte kind of thing. This felt like her going like, this is what I want to do. I want to
Mm-hmm.
just call all of you guys and tell you how wrong you are and how much danger you're all in. Because, oh my God, Vernestra just went off. It was great.
One of one of my criticisms, like I don't know if it's a criticism exactly, but it's just what it is with the book. Kind of going back to the Vernestra in this book is still not the Vernestra we saw in the Acolyte,
Mm-hmm.
and nowhere close. Like anyway, we've talked on about that. I shouldn't bring it up again, but
No,
it
I think it's
just.
relevant if you're going to label this book as an acolyte novel.
I also would argue it's the same for Indara. I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't see, and my problem with her character, I didn't hate this book. It's just easier to talk about these things for me, I guess. But she did not feel. How old is she in this book? Wasn't
I
she
think like
20s?
20s. Yeah.
She felt like a teenager.
Well, I think because she had, not had the support she needed to deal with her trauma.
It's true, but it was really hard for me to wrap my head around. How?
That's fair.
Maybe it's because I am now past 40. And I'm just like, I don't understand these young folk anymore. I don't
Well,
get off my
also
lawn.
like look at Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace. He's like a 27-year-old, like still a Padawan. And it's like, dude, get your act together. Like, what are you
No,
doing?
Obi-Wan's
Um,
perfect. What are you
I
talking
know.
about?
I know. Yeah, no, these characters, whether it was Vernestra or whether it was Indara, felt like much fuller than what we got in the Acolyte. Now, of
Yes.
course, the Acolyte we get, we don't get a ton of Indara because most of it's in flashbacks and stuff. But even that, you would think, okay, well, that would feel even more like this book because it's closer in the timeline, um, and it just doesn't. And again, I think that is it's a multi-pronged issue where it's like,
Hmm.
what is Disney, Lucasfilm doing to um, both support and not support these authors and writers and creators across the board? How are they measuring success? All of those things. That's a whole nother conversation to have. But as far as it regards this book, um, it's kind of God. I can't believe I'm going to bring this up. It's kind of Thrawn like, in that like Thrawn in Rebels and Thrawn in the novels is two different characters. They are not the same, and I will not
It's
be
true.
hearing arguments otherwise.
I
I
love
am not
Thrawn and I'm not arguing. So,
right. And I'm like, look, I don't like Thrawn. Don't care for him in
hmm
either situation. Um, but even that aside, that's just a literary analysis leads you to that
hmm
conclusion, right? And you don't have to do a lot of it. It's not to say that either version of the character is bad. It's just saying that it's not aligned, and that's the same thing I think here. Now, of course, there's the acolyte problem of it all, right? Where like there is a side of this that is not a good version of these characters, not a well written version of these characters. But in this book in particular, like these characters feel engaging at the very least.
yes, they are.
Vernestra.
I did enjoy it. I didn't
Right.
hate
Like that's
it.
the thing. It but there is the problem, and this is kind of something I'll bring this up as far as the Crystal Crown goes, which is the other acolyte novel. Both novels, and I think this is not coincidence. Feels like, why was that written?
hmm
You know, um, and that is worrisome to me, that we're putting out books without purpose, right? Sanctuary, for example, and we'll talk about this on a later episode. We'll talk about Crystal Crown on a later episode too. Sanctuary was like, okay, I know why this was written. It was written because this is just a straight up episode of the Bad Batch, right? I'm like 40 pages into Master of Evil, and I'm already like, okay, I know why this book was written. I know why it's necessary, right? Even going to something that like is a tie-in to something that doesn't exist anymore, the Princess and the Scoundrel being a tie-in to the Halcyon, right? It was literally written to just sell tickets to the Halcyon. Did a bad job of it, but um it it does a good job of like setting up what it's been written for as far as the characters are concerned. I don't know what the heck this book was written for, other than they wanted more acolyte content, because I still think Disney in particular, and Bob Iger in particular, thought that this book, or this series of the acolyte, was going to be a lot more successful than it was.
Yeah, I don't think you
You
put
know,
Plagueis at the end and
think that you're going to fail, but
you're going
like
to stop.
we should, if okay, this is the other frustration with these tie-in novels, is that not only is it like, why is it written, but it doesn't have any impact on that story, right? You read Catalyst and it completely changes how you read the beginning of Rogue One. You read Rebel Rising and it completely changes, all for the positive, how you look at that conversation between Jin and Saw in Rogue One. Even going back to something as simple as the Before the Awakening book, okay, taking you guys 10 years ago. All right, some of you were like, that are listening, were like probably like 3 or 4. Okay, shout out, thanks for listening. Go to your parents' phone, subscribe, all of that stuff. But there's a Before the Awakening story with Rey, and it's about how Rey starts to rebuild this ship, right? And it gives you background knowledge on how she knows so many languages, how she learned to fly, all of these things that, while the movie explains that, it goes into
hmm
more depth in it. I know why that's written. I don't know why the heck this book was written, or why the other Acolyte book was written. And that, as much as I enjoyed the book, and like I said, I initially gave it on first blush a 4 out of 5 because I liked so much of it. That's a problem.
Yeah. Were these books announced, planned before The Acolyte was non-renewed? Were they thinking there
Um,
was going to be a second season?
I think, if I remember correctly, that it was kind of brought to the fore around like the mid-season stuff.
Okay.
Um,
I just can't remember.
and yeah, and I mean, what I don't understand is like, the Mandalorian, super successful, and they canceled the Mandalorian novels. You know, um, but the Acolyte falls flat on its face, and they're like, let's put out these two novels, right? It's like it doesn't look. We know from history that Disney Lucasfilm is okay with working on projects for years and putting millions of dollars into them and then not even trying to make them. I'm looking at you, The Hunt for Ben Solo. Looking at you, Droid Stories. I'm looking at, like, oh my God, the Boba Fett movie. I'm
Dawn
looking
of the
like
Jedi.
Dawn of the Jedi. I'm looking at the Ryan Johnson like, and some of those were invested into to other degrees and stuff like that. But it's like, are they putting these books out because they're cheap ways to put Star Wars out into our galaxy? And if they are, okay, I get that, but also that's a problem. Are they putting these books out because the profit margin on a book is high? I don't know. They don't release profit, numbers on books. They don't release, sales numbers on books. So who knows how well these books are doing? Um, what I do know is that they are not reaching the level that they need to reach overall, right? Um, the High Republic was an amazing, amazing endeavor, and the fact that they pulled that off as successfully as they did, they deserve all their flowers for that. What bothers me now, well, let me back up. I am very excited that we're back to like single shot books.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was a huge, huge fan of the A New Dawn, Dark Disciple, Tarkin era of Star Wars books are back. And I got in many an argument on social media about like, no, these books are important, and it's okay that they're happening in a day or two. It's okay that they are not, hashtag required reading or whatever. They still matter, and they're still good, and they're still worthwhile. I would lose those arguments with a lot of the books that are coming out today. And that is concerning to me. And when you, going back to this book, when you think about that in regards of you have, um, a character who's played by Carrie Ann Moss and you're writing a book about her, and you have somebody with the weight of Vernestra Rowe and you're writing a book about her, and it still doesn't have that impact, that I think is an issue that's larger than like us rating these books. You know what I mean?
Right, right, right.
So go for it.
Positive front, I would like to know more about Indara's journey from here. I
Yeah.
and how she got to where she was just hanging out in a bar, something. I don't
Yeah,
know,
cantina thing.
cantina, but it didn't even feel like a cantina. It's just a hovel.
Well, they
Um,
didn't do the obligatory like scan around all the alien shots.
I don't know, I don't know what that was. I don't know the right words, I guess, but she seemed pretty hardened and jaded. Obviously, they get into some of that within the show, but there's more there to mine, I'm sure,
Mhm.
if they do it right.
What I found interesting in this one is that like essentially Vernestra and Andara just change places by the end of the book.
Yeah.
Did you catch that? Because like
Yes. Yes.
Vernestra starts, or excuse me,
Yes.
Indara starts by like isolating herself on Coruscant, and Vernestra is out wayseeking, and by the end, Indara is out wayseeking, and Vernestra is isolating herself on Coruscant. Yeah, I guess we can get into that part now, because like let me pull it up on my notes. The There were so many things we could have talked about with this book, and we can still talk about with like Ty York coming in and um,
Oh my
the
goodness. All the
Deborah LaPont.
names.
Yeah.
All the names I hadn't seen in so long. And I didn't finish reading the comics. I was like, ah, I might go back and do that one day, but
Well, so here's the end, right? So Vernestra, spoiler alert, if you were listening this long, I don't think I should have
gosh.
to say that, but just for giggles. This is at the very end of the book, and this is when Vernestra decides to um stay and become kind of the concierge for the communication between the Senate and the Jedi Council. On page 250, she says, "There are a lot of reasons. There was the realization that perhaps sharing my experiences with younger Jedi might help them consider the galaxy in a different way. I also started to think about the kind of Jedi I have been, the kind of Jedi I want to be, and what kind of legacy I would like to leave behind when I am gone. There was the fact that there were some people in the galaxy who must be brought to justice by the Republic, people who will always be just out of reach of the Order. Nilsson and Grisella helped me realize that, but mostly, I think I can help the Order become what it needs to be by being the link with the Senate. This way, instead of the High Council being bogged down by the minutiae of politics, the Senate has a dedicated office to route all requests. I have already decided that the Order is not here for their amusement, but for serious issues, and I plan on enforcing that." Let me start by saying this whole quote is wrong. You were going to say something. I'll let you go first
No,
on this
I
one.
was
What
just
were
like,
you
that's
thinking?
hard. That's like a knife to the heart because that's not what she becomes.
It's literally okay. Let me break it down. This is not what she becomes. Again, apologies for those of you watching on YouTube that I'm like looking at my phone right now. But
Yeah, I'm drinking water,
um,
so.
right, we're professionals here. We're good.
Eating
Um,
crunchy crackers or anything. I think I'm doing
that's
okay.
fair. That's fair. That's good. The kind of Jedi I want to be and the kind of legacy I would like to leave behind when I'm gone. As what? You're doing that more as like a concierge than you are as like a Wayseeker, being out
Hmm.
and being the legend of living the legend of Vernestra Row. The fact that there are some people in the galaxy who must be brought to justice by the Republic, people who will always be just out of reach of the Order. The dude doesn't get brought to justice, but how did you get to that conclusion? Okay. Then we get to I think I can help the Order be what it needs to be by being the link to the Senate. Are you now blaming Vernestra Row for leading the Jedi to basically becoming just a Republic toy? Because that's what they are by the Phantom Menace, and unless I'm interpreting this wrong, and this is where it starts to feel like this wasn't Justina Ireland's book to make. Um, this feels like it was forced in there.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
at the very end, if she had said, "I decided to stay on Coruscant and help train at the temple," or "I've been asked to join the council," or whatever it might be, right? Even if you go the route of like Qui-Gon in Master and Apprentice, where he's like, "I decided to just follow the will of the Force," and we have no idea what that really means in the in between time. All of that would have made sense. Having her start an office job just did not work at all, and it was a
No,
very disappointing ending.
there's no legacy to that. Like the way
Right,
you start, there's not. It's actually quite the opposite.
right.
You
She becomes a
you will
secretary.
pass in a hidden office, like that nobody really knows about. Uh, She was the one who created a light whip when she was worried about skirting the rules of the council and doing
Yes,
so. And now she's going to become who she becomes in the show that
and
we've
the
talked too much
whole
about.
the whole like the Jedi are not going to become like the Republic's
Yeah,
plaything. They're not going to be there for amusement kind of thing. I'm like, where did we get that from this book?
her legacy is one of failure.
That's a really good point. Yeah, yeah.
This is
So
Vernestra we're talking about. No.
well, and okay, so what I'm gonna look at it. And what was it called? The I want to make sure I get this right. The Jedi Annexation Act. The Senate, when they tried to pull the Jedi to be official part of the Republic, like this feels like that. This feels
Hmm.
like it created that, and that's a big time issue for me. Of like, well, you kind of gave them what they wanted, and what you said earlier in the book was not a good thing, and it was the book didn't lead to that ending, and that was a huge problem for me. And so I had issues with how that played out. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Indara becoming a Wayseeker was kind of obvious, and I'm okay, in a book like this to have like an obvious ending. This was a plot twist and not for the better.
No, no. I was shocked. Yeah, not in the good. sense of the word. Oh.
Because, like, what happens after this book then? You know what I mean?
Hmm. And here's the thing, like, I actually wouldn't mind learning more about Indara's character. I don't know that I care more about Vernestra at this point.
Ooh,
And that's really sad because she's an amazing character.
that hurts. But
Hmm.
you're not wrong.
I
You're
just,
not wrong.
I think they're just going to do more damage.
I mean, it feels like anytime, because, like, okay, this is a little conspiracy theory, no sources. I'm just kind of positing here. This feels like Disney or Lucasfilm or both interfered with the ending of this book and said, we need a reason for Vernestra to stay on Coruscant to connect to the Acolyte. And here's how you're going to do it. And that was taken away from, and maybe going back to our earlier conversation, like that, maybe that was the moment where Justina Ireland was like, I'm done.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know.
And I'll just throw the phrase out again. Vilification of the Jedi seems to be their priority at the moment. Let's
Yeah, I don't.
explain the prequels in all the wrong ways, is kind of
Well, and
how it feels.
also the prequels don't need explaining.
No,
The
they
text
really
is all it's all there. You might not like it. You might not like how George Lucas did it, but it's all there. And I think there is an element with the Jedi where, and this is a larger conversation that maybe you guys will get into on Patreon. So you guys make sure you subscribe, patreon.com/costing savers. Um, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to the Jedi, right? There's
hmm
the,
hmm
well, we want to make more, Jedi content with Rey and her Jedi Order and the new Jedi Order and the High Republic and people like the Jedi, so we want to tell more stories about them, right? These heroes of the Republic. And then on the other side, they're going like, we need to vilify the Jedi. Like Yoda needs to make even more mistakes to the point where it's like, why do we even believe him in The Empire Strikes Back? Um, Vernestra is the character we're going to use, even though there's no connection at all to who she is in the High Republic. Um, Soul is just the freaking worst.
Except he's
There's
really,
so
okay.
many.
So, sorry. That's a whole nother, that's about the show, not what we're talking about.
Yes, no,
So, sorry.
but like
I'll,
I think it all connects, right? It all
hmm
connects together. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you have in this book, the presentation of the collective, which is basically like a secret society almost, where oh, I just blanked on her name, Avon. Avon's
right.
um, son lives, and it's kind of like a scientist retreat where they're allowed to kind of work and experiment in peace and freedom. And Vernestra takes Jedi who no longer want to be in the order there. I don't think that's a coincidence that that's in this book, you know, um, because we're transitioning to that era where the Jedi are going to be in the wrong, and there's no denying that they made some mistakes, right? But it felt kind of a little meta of like, hey, we, maybe this is Justina Ireland kind of talking to us, going like, hey guys, I see this too. Like, I don't like it either. Here's a little thing that can give you a little bit of hope, you know, that there are still some people out there. You remember Emery Cantos, like he was great, right? He had it figured out. There's these little nods in there of like what it means to be a Jedi the right way. Uh, that I think Justina Ireland, to go back to things I've said about her writing before and why I like her so much as a Star Wars author, is she gets what I think George Lucas wanted the Jedi to be. And she reads the text of Star Wars really, really well. And there are a lot of people, and I'm not going to try to like name names and say it's this person's fault or that person's fault because I don't know, but it's undeniable by the results of what's come out that there are a lot of people who have a complete misunderstanding of what the Jedi are supposed to be in Star Wars that currently work at Disney and Lucasfilm.
We'll
It's
have to
just
talk off the record.
okay, and I don't know names. I wish I did, right? Like I'm a journalism teacher, so I always want to know sources and stuff like that. But like
Yeah.
this is not a journalistic podcast. this is a two friends talking about Star Wars books podcast, right? But you do look at the larger context and narrative of what's going on in the saga overall. And I think this book points to that kind of conclusion of, one, they need to get their act together as far as what they're going to do with the Jedi, and an understanding, and this is more of a cultural thing, there needs to be a better understanding that a singular incident or a singular point in time need not define an entire character or organization. The
That's well
prequels are
said.
designed to show, like, hey, this point in time is where the Jedi went wrong. We don't need hundreds of years of that, right?
Right.
Um, it's fine to just let it be that moment, right? Like it. This is a bad analogy, so I apologize in advance, but I think it'll bring some context. It's like Nazi Germany, right? You don't need to understand 200 years, 300 years of German history and the things that led to Hitler to understand that Hitler was bad and the
Hmm.
Nazis were bad. You can look at the 30 years or whatever that they were at the height of their power and say, like, hey, that was a really bad time. And guess what? We're not going to judge every German in the future based on those acts either. That's what needs to happen with the Jedi. We need to realize, and the people creating Star Wars need to realize that just because the prequels are about their downfall does not mean that we have to spend all the time we have with the Jedi looking at their downfall. It's just not necessary to the story that is being told. It's just not. Do we need a longer story of the Republic deteriorating? Maybe, because it takes longer for a democracy to fall apart, at least
Hmm.
history shows, than it does for an organization to fall apart. But it's just, it gets exhausting.
Especially when originally designed as an archetype, literally black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're if you're a kid watching it, or as an adult who wants to escape reality that's much more nuanced, it's nice to have things black and white sometimes,
Yeah.
I guess, and then go back to the way, like, not to forget that they're not, but it's fiction. And fiction, while we draw comparisons and love to relate it to ourselves, sometimes we just want to get away from our worlds, and not
Mm-hmm.
everything has to be explained all the time and nuanced up to death, and or lose its nuance for that matter.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say that's more what we're getting
yeah, yeah. That thought was a little half baked, but
to. Oh man. Well, okay, we're kind of getting to the end point here. And obviously, this is a pretty. I think this was kind of a more of a higher level thing than we normally get to on Don't Burn the Sacred Text. But for those of you who haven't listened before, like, this is what we do here. We don't necessarily just read you a summary of the book. We talk about these I guess, higher level concepts, or we try to at least. Um, but at the end of the day, the text has to stand on its own. And I think that, when you put this book into the context of everything that's going on, it's not necessarily for the betterment of Star Wars. But when you look at this book on its own and what it does and how it's written, it is, if you are a Star Wars fan, very worthwhile to read and enjoy, right? And so I definitely think it's worth checking out. But you want to give any final thoughts on it, and then we'll get into our rankings.
linger on how negative I've been, and I feel really bad about that.
Well,
It's
there's a difference
not a
between negative and critique. I think we've been
I
critical.
know. I know. And unfortunately, I do find it to be a fairly forgettable book, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. And
Yeah.
so I don't really remember a lot other than kind of general, I liked this, which is kind of hard to talk about in depth when you just
Yeah.
generally,
But
when
that's
you
kind of
get
where this
good
book is.
feelings.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that it's okay to just like a book and not love it. It's okay if a book is read and enjoyed and then kind of disappears into the pile of other books you've read. Not everything
Not
has to stay with
everything.
you.
And not everything has to be Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. You know what I mean? So, all right. Well, with that in mind, let's go ahead and go through our ratings of the book. You started with a 3. I started with a 3.75, both out of 5. I'll go ahead and go first on this one. I'm going to meet you where you started at a 3, because the more I sit with it, and even the more I think about like what we talked about when we talked about this book and how little of it was the actual book and more of it was about the overall narrative of Star Wars, I think that says something. I do really lean into the belief that Justina Ireland's hands were tied here, um, and or her heart really wasn't in this one. And so I think it's a, like you said, it perfectly summarized it. It's worth reading if you want to just enjoyable Star Wars book, and that's fine. But it's not necessarily one that I am dying to go reread.
And I'm sticking with my 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a 6 out of 10 total, 3 out of 5, and 3 out of 5. That's where we land on this one. I think that's a pretty solid, pretty solid place to be with a book, with a book that's tied to a show that got canceled because nobody liked it. Just
Unless
kidding.
you
Those of
go
you,
online and then everybody loved it. So
and then everybody. I'm just kidding. If you like the Acolyte, hey,
good for
you're allowed to.
you.
Exactly, you're
Good.
allowed to.
Enjoy things.
Exactly. Speaking of enjoying things, people want to enjoy what's going on Patreon. So go ahead and tell them where they can find you both online
Oh,
and then
goodness.
a little bit out of our Patreon.
When I crawl out of this hole I've been in, it's my, just briefly, my mental health did take kind of a bit of a dive for the last few months. So we are, but it's good. Good things are, it's going all up.
That's
And
fantastic.
so engagement will definitely increase. And I've got a couple episodes that Sarah and I are actually, Sarah finally watched Andor in its entirety, this summer.
Beautiful. We love
So
it.
we've been going through Andor. It's such a timely topic, I know, but we've been having a lot of fun with that, especially as two women talking about, in
Mm,
particular, Bix and the things that she goes through.
mm.
The stuff that I've listened to, I appreciate all the opinions and understand it's a topic for everybody, but I really have enjoyed having a stronger female, all female, both female
Yeah,
perspective
yeah, for
on it.
sure.
So we're doing that. There'll be other things in the future. So it's up. We're gonna rock and roll it from now on. And maybe I'll finally hop back on Facebook in the Facebook group. I feel like
Social media is hard.
Lindsay kind of says the same thing. You just kind of, uh, I'm always listening to things, so I don't even get on Instagram too much because it's all videos I have to listen to, and I've got a podcast
Mm.
going at all times. So, um, and I've kind of enjoyed the disconnect a little bit. I enjoy being at Patreon. I enjoy being here on the main feed when I'm lucky enough to do so, and um, I'll work on that engagement. But sometimes a
Well,
disconnected life is a nice life.
sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. And if you guys want to connect, we of course can be found over on Instagram and TikTok. And I keep forgetting we have a Blue Sky, to be honest with you, because X/Twitter became so exhausting, and then I was like, I don't really want anything that was kind of like that. Blue Sky is very different in the people that are there, but it's the same kind of idea. But really, what we do here more than anything is support literacy. So, of course, we have our Patreon that Amanda does, and all of the money that we get from that goes purely to buying and shipping books, Star Wars books in particular, to classrooms across the country. So, these are two teachers here talking to you saying, like, it's rough out there for us right now.
Sorry.
And teachers need support. So, as we get to this holiday season, as we get into the new calendar year, like let's send some teachers some free books, because nothing will brighten their day more than being able to encourage their kids into literacy with high interest books, which Star Wars books, I can tell you, having taught reading for almost a decade, Amanda will back me up on this. Star Wars books are high engagement books that kids
They
want to
are.
read. So
Even the
help us get
littles.
those in classrooms. And we don't pick where they go. They get nominated and we send them. That's it. That's the whole process. You go over to clashing.sabers.net, go to nominated teacher in the menu in the top right corner, and right there you sent books to a teacher. It takes you 5 minutes. I take care of everything else, and we're done. and we get to send free books to kids and teachers. So make sure you do that, and make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Make sure you subscribe. We've got more Don't Burn the Sacred Text coming out, with both Amanda coming back on and other guests joining us while Lindsay is working through her work. And of course, I'm recording with Devore later tonight to talk about the Force Awakens 10-year anniversary. There's so much stuff going on in the main feed, and you're going to want to be subscribed to that to get all of that completely free. So until next time, guys, keep reading, keep writing, but whatever you do, don't burn the sacred text.